Hey honey, welcome back to the Being Allowed podcast. As always, I am your host, Biba Shay, and also as always, I have a lot to say, and I just realized that rhymed. If you didn't tune into last week's episode, I strongly suggest that you do, because there we began a 3-week series under the umbrella of letters. Last week, we spoke to the men of our society, and this week, we are addressing the women. We and society at large can be very harsh when addressing men, women, and ourselves. This series aims to underline the importance of saying certain things and verbalizing certain truths, but in a way that neither antagonizes nor victimizes any single member. I feel like the gender conversation is just too complex for that, and it dates too far back to be presented in the simplistic way of everything is men's fault, or women are unreasonably retaliating, or whatever other narrative we hear nowadays. I believe that we can speak the truth in love and be level-headed and mature enough to accept different opinions. This series is therefore a conversation. So please feel free to leave your comments below or shoot me an email to further the conversation. Now, I am especially excited to get into today's conversation because I am obviously a woman myself. I can speak from experience. But I'm also very excited to get into my letter to the women because I think I see things differently to most, at least in some areas. Although, like most, I have been bruised by a patriarchal society and male-dominated world, especially here in Egypt and the Middle East, and I will give my examples of that as we begin. I still think I see things through a somewhat different lens to the common feminist discourse. But before we begin, I want to thank you guys for being such a thoughtful community. Thank you for being the kinds of people who are willing and open to look deeper into everyday issues and consider different opinions with an open and curious mind. That is what this world needs more of. People like you who are willing to listen, disagree, and have challenging, enriching conversations. So, that being said, I am not expecting us all to see eye to eye on this subject or any other. I am merely offering my perspective as a perspective. All right, without any further ado, let's begin today's conversation. Hello, my honeys. Welcome here or welcome back to another conversation at the Being Allowed podcast. And it's because it is called the Being Allowed podcast that I have given myself permission to speak on this topic. It is a topic that is obviously never going to be covered in just 2 episodes or 3 or however many, because the topic of gender, the topic of female discrimination, or now as the topic is rising, male discrimination in the world is something that is much deeper than for just one person to come on here on a podcast episode and just talk about. But what I can offer are personal stories, personal anecdotes, and then a personal worldview. Bimena, I consider myself a person who thinks. I'm a person who reads. I'm a person who gets into like pretty provocative conversations with my friends and with the people around me. I have over the years formulated an opinion, and I want to put it out there so that we can have a conversation that matters and a conversation that can at least like open our eyes, so that we can, move forward in any way, shape or form, whatever that looks like. But I mainly want to talk to us here on the Being Allowed podcast, اللي بيسمعوا from the Arab world. I grew up in Egypt, and therefore, my worldview, especially as it comes, as insofar as it concerns like gender and all those things, طبعا has been shaped by years of growing up here and dealing with Arab men, Middle Eastern men, Egyptian men, all that stuff. And then also having conversations with women, Middle Eastern women, Egyptian women, all that stuff. And obviously it's not the same conversation in every country. And I think like obviously that's why it's like an onion, you know, endless layers. Oh, كل layer is like determined by certain factors and everything. So I want to just address today's letter and today's conversation to us women who grew up in the Middle East بالذات. And obviously this podcast بتكلم بالإنجليش وبالعربي, and I therefore kind of like need to اللي هو explicitly say إنه أنا بتكلم على الستات دلوقتي وعامة الرجالة دلوقتي كمان اللي بيسمعوا conversation دي, اللي we have been fortunate enough to get an education, بنفهم إنجليزي. لو انتوا فاهمين conversation دي, لو انتوا بتسمعوا the Being Allowed podcast من ساعة ما ابتدت وعارفين طريقة كلامي إنه I mix the Arabic and the English, that is because I believe إن إحنا وسط متعلم المحظوظ في وسط بلد يعني that is marked by poverty, marked by people who are much less fortunate than we are. I believe it's in our hands, the educated few, إن إحنا نبتدي ال conversations اللي تغير. إحنا people have invested time and effort and money لأن هما يكونوا مخنا ويدونا الفرص اللي احنا نقدر بيها نخش جوا conversations ونخش ونعمل الحاجات اللي كل واحد بقدرته, كل واحد بمواهبه, اللي ensure ان احنا كمستقبل وكأجيال جاية نبقى مختلفين ونكسر السايكلز اللي يمكن generations قبلنا كتير جدا ما قدروش يكسروها. بس دلوقتي احنا first of all we are far more educated. Second of all, the day and age in which we live right now, we have resources, we have potentials that maybe previous generations didn't have, such as the ability to create a podcast and then engage with people as they listen to this podcast, the ability to be online and be on social media and join in conversations with complete strangers, ونقبل لبعض بكل تواضع ان احنا نسمح لحد تاني يغير لنا رأينا, ولو احنا رأينا متغيرش من الناس اللي حوالينا نبقى humble enough ان احنا نخش في conversations نطرح آرائنا احنا بحيث ان conversations تفضل تحصل. And that's really my point. So I'm addressing you who have been listening to the Being Allowed podcast for years, who are educated enough to have the ability to get into this conversation. And I guess that's why I'm going to keep speaking in English. I'm going to keep mixing both languages لأن أنا عارفة كويس قوي إن إحنا اللي نقدر نخش في conversations دي. عشان كده مش حاسة إن أنا محتاجة أغير الطريقة اللي بتكلم بيها في البودكاست عامة. حبيت إن أنا أبتدي conversation النهاردة. It is mainly directed at the women, although I highly strongly encourage men as well to listen to today's podcast, because زي ما I encourage women to listen to last week's episode عشان هي دي conversation ما بيننا كلنا. بس being an Arab Egyptian woman, عندي كام قصة عايزة أحكيها لكم على حاجات real life حصلت لي أنا. أنا عندي 31 سنة وعندي قصص يعني ما تتعدش, بس في 3 specific stories that are maybe a little R-rated, so I'm just giving this as a يعني heads up كده, إنه this is real life, this is what women في البلاد العربية وفي مصر بيحتاجوا يواجهوه, وده الحقيقة بتاعت الواقع. طيب هحكي لكم 3 قصص حصلوا لي. أول واحدة دي هحكي لكم من أول أصغر واحدة لأكبر واحدة. in terms of أنا كنت أصغر when it happened يعني. كنت في إعدادي وكنت رايحة الكنيسة أنا وواحدة صاحبتي, بس قبل الكنيسة كنا بنتمشى في الكوربة, رحنا نجيب نتغدى الأول قبل ما نروح الكنيسة. فرحنا بنتغدى and we're just having lunch and everything is great, and then we were having lunch right next to where our church is. فعادي بنعدي شارع بنكون في الكنيسة, فعندنا شارع, وصلنا شارع الكنيسة, واحد نده لنا يا بنات يا مش عارفه. by the way mind you يعني احنا كنا الصيف وده كان على الساعة مثلا 5, فالدنيا كانت منورة, كان في عز النور يعني, ما كانتش ضلمة خالص. حد راح نده لنا من بعيد، فبصينا احنا ورانا لقينا انا بقول لكم احنا كنا في اعدادي، الراجل قام قلع البنطلون بتاعه، فاحنا اتسرعنا طلعنا نجري دخلنا جوه الكنيسه بسرعه جدا، واحنا الاتنين كنا في صدمه كده، و it almost went يعني it went without saying ان ولا انا وهي اتكلمنا على اللي لسه حاصل. احنا بجد بصينا لبعض بصه مرعبه كده، واحنا الاتنين ما فتحناش الموضوع، واحنا الاتنين ما قلناش لمخلوق. يعني انا متاكده ان دلوقتي لما اهلي يسمعوا البودكاست دي يعني عمرهم ما سمعوا ان القصه دي حصلت، بس هي حصلت. ولسه من قريب جدا صاحبتي دي هي عايشه بره دلوقتي، جت مصر السنه اللي فاتت وقعدنا نتكلم وافتكرنا الموقف ده، طلعت هي كمان لسه فاكراه، لسه فاكره ان هو حصل. ف obviously something like this when it happens when you're so young it leaves a mark even though we are subconsciously told never to talk about this ever. ولا انا ولا هي اتكلمنا مع حد بعد كده. فده اول موقف وانا في اعدادي. موقف تاني كان عندي 19 سنه، actually كنت لسه هكمل 19 سنه بتهيالي، وكان قبل الثورة على طول actually، وكنت كنت بشتغل كده شغلانة، يعني كنت في الجامعة بس أخدت winter job كده ما بين السمسترز، وكنت بصور يعني كان في ناس جاي من بره، وكان مفروض ان انا هبقى ورا الكاميرا مع ال journalists وكده، just basically making sure that the people who are here from France are safe and okay and good وكل حاجة. فانا مركزه وهما بيصوروا whatever show that they were بيصوروه، ومره واحده جه واحد and he physically touched me, like he physically harassed me، وانا اتصدمت وفضلت واقفه متمسمره في مكاني، يعني literally ما جمعتش ايه اللي حصل، لان لو كنت جمعت في لحظتها كنت لطشته او كنت صرخت او كنت جريت وراه، بس انا ما ادركتش اللي لسه حاصل. I was in shock and I just stood there and then started crying and crying and crying. وبعد كده كان معانا واحد مفروض ان هو security، ومفروض ان هو he's also armed with a gun. فندهت له قلت له هو انت كنت فين وانت لسه ما شفتش ايه اللي لسه حاصل وبتاع؟ راح he smirked كده وضحك شويه وقال معلش اصل السلاح تقيل والجزمه مش مريحه، فانا ما لحقتش اجي. قلت له امال ايه لازمه ان انت وجودك كسكيورتي؟ and it was just so no one cared. يعني I remember even talking to some of the boys who were there اللي هو did anyone see what just happened؟ يعني the guy literally physically harassed me and ran and no one cared and I was just standing there weeping. no one cared. اخر موقف خالص، طبعا ده مش اخر موقف خالص، بس اخر موقف هحكي عنه النهارده ان بعدها حصل لي كذا حاجه، هو الشهير اللي هو شقلب حياتي. it was just the last straw اللي من بعدها قررت ان انا مش هقعد ساكتة تاني، لانه من الواضح ان كانت طول حياتي بيحصل حاجات وانا بفضل ساكتة. لا ده كان موقف اللي انا قررت مش هسكت تاني خلاص، وده كان موقف المطار اللي حصل في سنة 2021 اللي العالم كله عارف عنه. و it was just horrible. وناس كتيرة جات لي اللي حصل، يعني انا كنت راجعة من لبنان، وانا في المطار في مصر واحد من اللي بيشتغلوا في المطار decided to take a picture of me. وطبعا انا مش هخش في تفاصيل، اللي عايز يخش في اي تفاصيل ليها علاقة بالقصة الترaumatizing دي يكتب على جوجل هيطلع له 60,000 result، بس انا مش داخلة في الموضوع ده تاني. بس برضو هو حس انه ليه الحق يصورني ياخد صورة inappropriate لواحدة في المطار، وعادي. ناس كتيرة وقت المطار قالوا لي ده حتى ما لمسكيش، ده حتى ما كلمكيش، ده حتى ما عكسكيش، مجرد اخد صورة يعني ما تفوتيها له يعني. But that's exactly what I want to talk about today. اولا ان انا وصلت للمرحله ان انا محتاجه اعمل اللي انا عملته في الراجل ده واسجنه عشان صوره. اولا هو مش بيس ان حد يصور ست outside of her consent، بالذات نوع الصوره اللي اتصورت لي. مبدئيا ده مش عادي، مفيش حاجه اسمها هي صوره بس، لا هي مش صوره بس، وده برضو مش عادي. بس أنا أصلا كنت واصلة لمرحلة الانفجار دي لأني I grew up being an object and believing myself to be an object when complete strangers on the street, رجالة يمين وشمال, all of them, what they all had in common is that they all believe deep down in their hearts and in their minds إن هما فوق القانون, وإنه عشان هما رجالة يعملوا اللي هما عايزينه, لأن متوقعين إن أنا كست من الناحية التانية هخاف, هتكسف, مش هحكي لحد. وعارفين كمان كويس قوي إن مفيش قانون هيطبق, إن مفيش حد هيجي يقول لهم تلت التلاتة كام. وده بالظبط اللي حصل لي في المطار. ده بالظبط اللي حصل لي يوم 15 جون 2021 لما الراجل صورني في المطار. إن أنا طلعت قلت للسيكيورتي اللي في المطار اللي هم مفروض موجودين لحماية المسافرين, واشتكيت الراجل ده واخدناه وما حصلش اي حاجة. بالعكس انا اللي اتهزقت وانا في المكتب, اتهزقت لان الراجل اللواء الكبير اللي قاعد كان بيقول انه لا صورتك مش في التليفون ده اصلا, وحاولت اخد التليفون علشان اوري الصورة, اتهزقت واتقال لي ان انا اترزع واقعد على الكرسي وما افتحش بقي, وهما بيكدبوني علشان الراجل ما يطلعش غلطان, لان ده زميلهم بيشتغل في المطار. ويؤسفني اني اقول ان الطريقة الوحيدة اللي انا خدت بيها حقي هي through social media, مش عشان في قانون اتطبق. وفي الاخر القانون اتطبق, و I am so blessed ان في الاخر القانون اتطبق والراجل فعلا اتحبس. بس اضطريت انا كست اعدي بايه عشان اخد my basic rights. انا طلع عيني وطلع عين اصحابي, وكم واحدة نعرفها عدد بحاجات زي كده, كم قصة شفناها من ساعتها على السوشيال ميديا ليها علاقة بكده. It's because we grew up ingrained in a society that is patriarchal, in a society where men have they experience zero repercussions for their actions. There are no consequences to male behavior or male misbehavior. And then what happens? We as women believe the right thing to do is to just sit back, نحط رجل على رجل, we just move on, pretend nothing ever happened. Well, I have taken it upon myself to bring that to a close and to just literally stop it. With the ironic thing بقى is انه الاسبوع اللي فات نزلت الابيسود اللي هو Dear Men, وقعدت اقول انه في ايد الراجل المتعلم انه هو اللي يعمل conversations ويخش في مواضيع raise the important issues that this world needs. The next day, literally the next day, بفتح انستغرام لقيت القصة بتاعت العطار اللي البنت بتحكي فيها على ازاي هي مش عارفة ترجع بيتها لان في واحد عيلته عيلة مناصب بيهددوها من ان هي مينفعش ترجع بيتها تاني. They attacked her mother لما البنت كل اللي عملته انها فتحت بقها ضد التحرش لما واحد عايش معاها في العمارة اتحرش بيها. And all she did was ask for her basic right as a citizen. And now she's scared for her life. She's scared for her family's life. إن هما مش قادرين يرجعوا بيتهم. أنا دلوقتي حكيت لكم شوية قصص قصصي وقصص واحدة احنا عايشينها دلوقتي على السوشيال ميديا مموتاني. القصة دي مموتاني لأن هي بتفكرني بقصصي والحاجات اللي أنا عشت بيها. And the purpose of this is to say that when feminists rise, when angry women rise, it's for a reason. It's because we have had to live these stories. It's because if a person gives birth to a daughter these days, that person is terrified for their daughter's life just because she's a daughter. ماشية في الشارع هي كست هي مرعوبة. كمية القصص اللي احنا كستات محتاجين نعيشها وللأسف كتير مننا بنعيشها silently لأن احنا عايشين في مجتمع مرعب ولأن احنا عارفين ان عشان احنا ناخد حقنا ده محتاج خناق ومحتاج ان الواحد يتهان. انا بعد موضوع المطار ده انا خسرت اصحاب, انا سمعتي بقت على كل لسان, انا وشي بقى في كل حتة، هل دي حاجة انا كنت عايزاها؟ لا. كل اللي كنت عايزاه ان لما واحد يتحرش بيا ياخد جزاته وانا حياتي ما توقفش عشان ده حصل. بس هل ده بيحصل؟ لا. Unfortunately, up until this very day, in order for women to receive their right as citizens هنا, their right to protection, their right to walk down the streets safely without fearing for their lives, دي حاجة unheard of. هما محتاجين ان هما يريتش لإنستغرام، لسوشيال ميديا، لكل الحاجات دي اللي بتفضح علشان ناخد حقنا. طبيعي ان بعدين when feminists rise out of ashes like these, that they are angry, that they are terrified, that they're extremely skeptical of male behavior. So dear woman, I completely validate how you feel. I validate the fact and now every single time you deal with a man, you are terrified. Every single time you come into contact with a stranger on the street, you feel the need to cross over to the other side of the street to avoid the possibility of being harassed, of being touched, of receiving words you don't want to hear, of being objectified. I completely sympathize with you. I see where you're coming from because me too, my sister. I have lived these stories and I still continue living these stories, and it is abominable إن إحنا لسه في القرن 21 سنة 2023 أهي بتخلص، لسه محتاجين نخاف بالطريقة دي، لسه محتاجين نتوتر بالطريقة دي. بس الحقيقة إن conversation النهاردة isn't only about sexual harassment in the streets. It's not about what women have had to endure merely for being women on the streets. لا، تعالوا ناخد القصص اللي بتحصل جوه البيوت لما نتجوز احنا في المجتمعات بتاعتنا, us the English speakers, the very well educated people. Unfortunately, this patriarchy, no matter how much we'd like to believe otherwise, has seeped into families. It has seeped into the DNA of the man, of the Arab man or of the Egyptian man. طبعا مش كل الرجالة كده ومش كل الرجالة عندها نفس المبادئ دي, بس بتبقى وحشة قوي لما الرجالة المتعلمة اللي مصروف على تعليمها اللي كبرانة في عائلات محترمة نشوف برضو ان هما لسه بيعاملوا ستاتهم بنوع من الانواع superiority in relationships. I know so many people. I have seen one too many stories of people in my circles, ناس أعرفهم personally وعارفة تربيتهم وعارفة تعليمهم, في السنة بتاعت إنه a woman can only speak if she is standing behind her man. A woman is only valued in light of her man. كام واحدة مننا عارفة إنها ملهاش قيمة غير لو اتجوزت, وجوزك هو اللي دلوقتي بقى رئيسك, هو اللي دلوقتي بقى راسك. كام واحدة مننا ما سمعتش القصة دي one way or another من طنط أو أنكل في عزومة أو في أصحابها اللي حواليها. كام واحدة مننا ما اضطرتش تلاقي نفسها في موقف إن هي she is less than the man. Well, let me tell you something, women. Unfortunately, the men who are of this sort receive their value and their validation from their born gender, right? Their born sex. And then because the society just gives them the glory for being men, هما ما بيحسوش ان هما محتاجين يتعبوا او يبذلوا مجهود او يعرفوا نفسهم او يشتغلوا على نفسهم اكتر. فقيمتهم الوحيدة, انا بتكلم على نوع رجالة معينة قوي, قيمتهم الوحيدة بتيجي من كونهم راجل, بس هما ما عندهمش محتوى. My letter to you right now, dear woman, is know that your worth is in the fact that you are a thinker. Know that your worth is in the fact that you are vulnerable, that you are willing to wear your heart on your sleeves. And even though society tells you that that's a weakness, dear woman, that is a strength. It is a strength to be able to be vulnerable. It is a strength to be able to put your thoughts out there on the table. It is a strength to verbalize what you don't like about society. It is a strength to stand up in a patriarchal world against men who have nothing going for them other than their gender, المكتوب على بطاقة بتاعتهم إن هما راجل. Unless a man gives you something that is worth your time, do not belittle yourself for him. If a man tries to assert his power by saying things like, because I said so, or you're supposed to cook me dinner every single day, or you're supposed to do this, that, and the other, challenge that way of thinking. Challenge, شوفوا, sure, I'm willing because I'm a woman and I am strong as a woman and I have the strength to serve out of love and to serve out of conviction, not to serve because I'm told, not to serve because you said so. No, not because you said so. If I want to make you dinner, it's because I want to show you that I love you by making you dinner. It's not because it's the expectation. وقصاد كده ايه؟ لازم اخد قيمة. لازم اخد ان الراجل اللي انا قاعدة معاه ده واحد اقدر اخش معاه في conversation. واحد دماغه موزونة. دماغه مصروف عليها. دماغه بتشتغل وبيشتغل على نفسه. Dear woman, do not settle for an empty man. Do not belittle your worth على راجل فاضي. بس عارفة لو راجل قيمته فيه، عارفة لو راجل تقدري تخشي في conversation معاه، حطيه فوق راسك. Because that is your strength. That is your strength. It is because you choose, not because you are told. And we women, the cycle stops with us. This is where the cycle stops. خلاص. The days of meek women, shy women, embarrassed women who بياخدوا treatment البشعة اللي are sexually harassed. ومش بس كده، اللي الرجالة اللي في حياتهم نفسهم بيحطوا عليهم authority merely because they are men. لا. This stops. I feel like last week I might have been a little too gentle with the men. And then the story that I heard the very next day enraged me. خلتني أفتكر what a patriarchal world we live in. The fact of the matter is that this conversation today was not a feminist conversation. Nope. You see, feminists are loud. Feminists make a lot of noise. Feminists want to be the exact same as men. I'm not a feminist. I don't think I want to be the exact same as men. I believe that we as women were born with a whole other set of strengths. We are equally as absolutely crucial to the world. We are equally as valuable, equally as necessary in order for society to be healthy, in order for society to be level and balanced. كستات, we are equally as important. But we're not the same. We're not built the same. I think men and women need to complement each other. We both need the other person to exist. لأن this is what creates balance. And that's a beautiful thing. It's just that we have been suffering the consequences of decades upon decades of the balance being tipped to favor one side. طبيعي قوي. You know when the pendulum swings مثلا 180 درجة للناحية، طبيعي and it's going to swing back 180 درجة برضو. I sympathize with the women who have had to suffer the consequences of a patriarchal world. That is not something to be taken lightly. But remember, women, that your value is not despite men. It is not despite the patriarchy we have had to suffer for years. Your value is in who you are as a crucial member of this society. We were created very, very differently, but equally as important, equally as necessary, equally as worthy of love and respect and honor and dignity, equally. The fact that we grew up in a society that tells us إن الراجل لازم يحترم والست لازم تتشقلب علشان تحترم الراجل، أنا بقولك كست مش هتحترمي الراجل بس عشان هو راجل، هتحترمي الراجل اللي يحترم، وما تخليش حد يقولك غير كده. Respect the man who has earned respect. The exact same way you should respect the woman who has earned respect. No one receives respect on a silver platter because they were born a certain way, because they were born into royalty, or because they were born into the privilege of being a man in a patriarchal world, male-dominated world. Dear woman, respect the man who has earned your respect. Otherwise, walk away. But don't disrespect yourself in the process. If a man is not worthy of your respect, you pack your things and you leave. Because your worth is not in spite of a man. It is not in spite of a patriarchy and male-dominant world. Your value is in who you are. Your wisdom, your kindness, your vulnerability, your strength. That's what makes you a woman. That's who you are. تعرفوا حاجة؟ I am at the end of myself. I don't know how many other conversations we need to have in this world. How many conversations we need to have. But today I want to say that the answer against a patriarchy or male-dominated world is not in a matriarchy, the way that the Barbie movie has suggested. It is not إنه إحنا معرفش. It's not إن إحنا نبقى غضبانين وماشيين بغضب وبنشكك في كل حاجة. لا، مش أنا ما أقدرش أعيش بشكك في كل راجل بيجي into contact معاه. ما أقدرش أعيش كده. This is not a sustainable way. I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to be someone who's walking around with all this resentment تجاه النص التاني من المجتمع. literally نص. مش عايزة أعيش كده. I think إن إحنا كستات مفروض نعيش مدين فرصة للرجالة يثبتوا لنا رجولتهم, what they are made of. And when they prove one thing or the other to us, نعرف مفروض نتعامل معهم ازاي, نعرف أولهم من آخرهم ايه. The answer is for us to continue being the badasses that we are, to continue doing what we can do, having the conversations that we can have. نبطل نبقى خايفين ونبقى courageous enough and strong enough to speak truth to power until changes are made. And in the process, girl, do your thing. Live your life. It really doesn't matter what society says about you or what society says you should be. Because we are not here in spite of a patriarchy. We are not here in spite of men. We are not here in retaliation against them. That still puts them in the center of the story. They're not the center of the story. Neither are we. We are both very equal members of society. Just keep doing your thing. Keep being an individual. But know very, very well that the patriarchy doesn't need to have an effect on you. You can speak against it. You can treat the men the way that they deserve to be treated, the way that they earn the treatment. All right, I think I can have this conversation for hours and hours more, which I'm not going to do anymore. But thank you again for being here, for listening to this conversation, for taking part in a challenging couple of weeks, بنعمل فيهم challenging conversations that are maybe a little outside of what the Being Allowed podcast was initially made to talk about. But I just feel like this conversation keeps coming up. So might as well have it here on the Being Allowed podcast. If you like today's episode and if you're in support of the Being Allowed podcast, please leave a review on Spotify or Apple, and like and share with your friends so that more people can join the conversation, so that we can be our real, unscripted selves out loud in this day and age, which is a hard thing. Thank you guys so much for being here. I can't wait to see you again or for you to listen again next week.